going live. Yes, we are live.
Hello, I warmly welcome you to our 26th webinar by the Academy of Space Renaissance International. My name is Sabine Heinz and I'm the host of our webinar series. And on the 3rd of October, I'm delighted that you have come to join us. In Germany, we have holiday because we have the reunification of Germany. And I'm really happy to announce our today's special guest, Professor Dirk Schulze-Makuch from the Technical University Berlin. Hello, Dirk.
Hi, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm fine, and I'm really happy that you are here. It's a pleasure for us to have you here. And Dirk will speak today about the cosmic zoo hypothesis and the expected diversity of planetary alien habitats. I also would like to welcome our vice president, one of our vice presidents and former president and founder of Space Renaissance International, Adriano Ortino. Welcome.
Good evening, everybody. We're very happy to give this webinar tonight after some weeks that we didn't because we were in Paris to the IAC, the International Astronautical Congress, for more than 1 week. It was very interesting. We had a lot of activities over there. We already posted several videos that we made in the Congress and in our booth, because for the first time in history, SRI had a booth at the exhibition center of the IAC in Paris. It was together with some of our partners, with Euromoon Mars, Lunex, with MMAARS, an academy from the United States, with Susan Jebel, with the Origin project, that's an artistic project by Mark Yeager and Jean-Luc, and many other partners that we came to our booth, and we made several activities, including playing some jazz music. Incredible. Okay. So we are restarting our webinar series today. And by the way, in October we have 3 of these things instead of 2 because we jump at one turn. Okay. However, okay.
Okay. Thank you, Adriano. Dirk, before I leave you the stage, I would like to introduce you to our audience. Dirk has been also as one of our speakers at the Space Renaissance Art and Science Festival in Berlin, held at the Archenhold Observatory in Berlin. Dirk Schulze-Makuch received his Ph.D. in geosciences at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Afterwards, he took up a fellowship at the NASA Goddard Space Flight Center, worked as an assistant professor at the University of Texas at El Paso, and later as associate and full professor at Washington State University. In 2010, he received the Friedrich-Wilhelm Bessel Award from the Humboldt Foundation for extraordinary achievements in theoretical biology. Sorry, my Spanish is always jumping in my English. Since 2013, he is a faculty member of the Technical University Berlin in Germany and holds a professorship for planetary habitability and astrobiology, leading the Astrobiology Research Group. He still is adjunct professor at Washington State University and also an associate member of SETI. SETI stands for Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. And Dirk published more than 200 papers and 8 books in the field of planetary habitability and astrobiology, including the 3rd edition of Life in the Universe, Expectations on Constraints and the Cosmic Zoo, Complex Life on Many Worlds, first published in 2017. Since 2016, Dirk is president of the German Astrobiological Society and council member of the European Astrobiology Network. He gives interviews in scientific television documentaries such as National Geographic and Discovery Channel, in Japan, in Germany, and he reports about his research in media and news and so on. Dirk, I'm really excited that you are here, and I'm really curious to learn about your topic today. And the stage is yours. You may share the screen.
Thank you for having me. And let's see how that works. Hopefully that works.
It looks good.
Okay. I think this is the technology at least seems to work. So again, thank you for having me, and I'm delighted to give a talk on the cosmic zoo hypothesis and the expected diversity of planetary alien habitats. And let's start, well, where we usually start, that is on Earth. And if you look at our planet, it's habitable, of course, for us, and we always kind of focus on ourselves. At temperature of 0 to 40 degrees, 1 bar pressure, medium as a solid medium, and we are heterotrophs. That means we eat the others. But Earth is not only habitable for us as humans, but it's also, for example, for the great white shark. That's temperature range from 12 to 24 degrees, a much higher pressure. It lives in salt water and a slightly alkaline pH, but it eats also the others. But then it is also habitable to a small organism called Asgianus infernus. And that organism has an optimal temperature, living temperature of 88 degrees C. So it lives at the hydrothermal vents. Pressure about 1 bar and a very acidic pH. And it basically lives from inorganic nutrient sources. So that organism is very different, but it calls Earth also home. Okay, let's see the next one. So, so we are, of course, excited as astrobiologists to find any kind of life, but most of it we would be excited to find a complex life. What we'll do, what we are very intrigued about is to find a second Earth, a second biosphere that is so full of biomass and biodiversity as our own planet. And if you look into space, we know now that there's, well, right now it's close to 5,000 or even more than 5,000 exoplanets, planets outside of the solar system. Most of them are kind of gas giants, still pretty high, but we're getting more and more that are Earth-like or even from the size Mars-like. So the question is, could there be complex, perhaps even intelligent life out? And if we do that, we have to be really quite open-minded, and we have to, for example, here in this image from a colleague contributed, we also have to look, for example, planets around different type of stars other than a G star. So if you think about complex life elsewhere, there's a different kind of thought processes about it. One is the rare Earth hypothesis by Peter Ward and Ron Brownlee. And they proclaimed that the evolution of complex life requires an improbable combination of astrophysical, geological, and biological circumstances. That meaning that the evolution of complex extraterrestrial life is a very improbable and likely to be extremely rare. That you maybe still have several places where you have microbial life, but complex life, just Earth is so special. And William Baines and I did start in 2016 to really question that and put it then finally on paper. And we looked at the different kind of transitions in the evolution of life. And we found that the key innovations during the evolution of life on our planets have been achieved several times and using very different biochemical pathways on the way toward complexity, yet with the same function. So our conclusion was, if stably habitable planets are common, life on those planets will develop complex life forms. So complex life should be also relatively common. We ended then up to write a book about it, The Cosmic Zoo, Complex Life on Many Worlds, which has also been translated into German and actually into Turkish right now too. And one of the big questions was, are humans a galactic oddity, or freak of nature, or would that be something what we expect elsewhere as well? So is it rare Earth or is it cosmic zoo? So the questions we want to answer or address is what is unique about life on Earth? Would life on another world evolve the same way if the tape of life on Earth would be rewound? Would we get really the same result? So if we think about cosmic zoo, I mean, with every hypothesis, the question is, how do we test? If we have complex life, what do we mean with that? We mean multiple cell types, specialist functions, a complex developmental program, and also more intricate ways of movements. And functions can occur very many different times and different ways. Here we, for example, have imaging function. And it can be from a fly or from a bird or from a spider. They have very different eyes, but yet they all use imaging vision. Or maybe even more amazing is it's about powered flight. We have, of course, a lot of insects that can fly, but we had dinosaurs that could fly. We have mammals that can fly. We even have fish that can fly. So, and several of these were invented basically independent from each other. So we identified three major paths toward innovation, and that may look at the first thing a little bit complicated, but please stay with me. Actually, not that difficult. So we first have a critical path model. And the idea is that there's a major event or innovation requires preconditions that take time to develop. So the time is needed is to a large degree determined by the nature of event and the geological and environmental conditions of the planet. But it will happen. It's like thinking about it. If you have a bathtub and you fill it up with water, eventually it will flow over and the next step is achieved. Then we have a random walk model. That is a major event or innovation is highly unlikely to occur in a specific time step. And the likelihood does not change substantially with time. The picture can have here is if you have 6 dice and you have to have 6 sixes. Each time when you throw it, the likelihood that you get the 6 sixes is not higher than with the previous throw. And then you have the many paths model. That means a major event or innovation requires many random events to create a complex new function, but many combinations of these can generate the same functional output. So here you can see it like in a poker game. You can win with 4 aces, you can win with a royal flush. There's several different paths to basically achieve what you want, the function. So, and what we are saying here is that if we can show that all the major transitions or key innovation are many past events, that's a various ways to get there, then we likely live in a cosmic zoo. This does not mean that we end up with animals and plants like on Earth, but organisms that in their function will be can be do the same thing as animals and plants on our planet. So right now, the first next step is I'd like to show you a few selected transitions. The first major transition, of course, original life. Evidence points to the origin of life somewhere between 4.2 and 3.5 billion years ago, probably more to the older time. There are some impetus that people thinking it's more evolved at the hydrothermal vents, but that's not proven, that's not clear. The underlying problem or the difficulty is to get three key functions: information carriers, genetic code, and membranes. Well, the information carriers are the genetic codes, then the membranes are the boundary conditions and the proteins that do the work all together in the same basically space and the same time to work and everything to work together. And we still do not have a good understanding how that happened. Over here, actually, we have to punt right away, which is, of course, not that nice, because we do not know actually what the evolutionary process here was, because we lack this understanding. And we will revisit the origin of life issue a little bit later still. But let me move on for now. And there's a major transition, the use of light, where we can make the point very well. We know or believe to know that photosynthesis evolved from mechanisms that were meant to protect organisms from light, and particularly from harmful UV radiations. So there's now different ways to capture light. Most common is chlorophyll-based photosynthesis, but there's also very different chlorophylls, depending, whether bacteria use it or plants or what kind of organism it used. But you can also capture light by rhodopsins or carotenoids and turn that in chemical energy. For example, bacterial rhodopsin light capture is chemically completely different from chlorophyll-based capture. So there's certainly many paths to harvest light. Here I just, on the image, I show a nice rock quartzite that I recovered from the Atacama Desert. I moved it over, this was on the bottom. And that are cyanobacteria that live on the underside of the rock and make a living. And they use basically the quartzite, they still get enough light through it. But it's filtered the UV light out. And of course, being on the ground, there's a little bit more moisture as well. So great sign of how life can adapt. Another major transition is endosymbiosis, or that gave rise to the eukaryotes and to the nucleus. Endosymbiosis is a frequent event on one that is still occurring today. It actually can occur between all different kinds of species, even between archaean animals. We do not really know how it evolved, whether from parasitism or incomplete digestions or both. But for example, lichen, is a symbiosis of fungi and algae or cyanobacteria. And so we can show that endosymbiosis led to the invention of many different main critical organelles, like the mitochondria, the chloroplast, nucleus, and possibly also other organelles. So this is clearly also a many-path event. One, what seemed to be for us always very important is multicellularity, because we are multicellular organisms, and we distinguish ourselves from the single cell organisms. But in nature, that's actually not that clear cut, because there's organisms like here, those ones here, myxobacteria, that can actually move between single cellular stage and multicellular stage. And there's in some kind of genera also, there are species, some of them are single cellular, some are multicellular, and again, some others that can switch. So what for us is a crucial, thing between unicellularity and multicellularity to decide, for nature, that seems to be relatively easy, and also something that has happened multiple times. So again, we feel very confident that this is a many-pass event. Now you see getting more and more closer. What for most of us is really important is where we're getting closer to us as a human species, intelligence. Well, humans are not the only intelligent species on our planet. There's also like a lot of other ones, like octopus, birds, like crows, then whales and dolphins and primates. So there's clearly other intelligent organisms on our planet. And intelligence is a needed asset for, especially for predating species. If you think about it, a lion has to be more smarter than an antelope, because a lion has to basically extrapolate into the future and see where the antelope is running to, so that the lion can hunt and eat the antelope, because otherwise, if it can't feed, it will die. Now, a wolf, for example, is not as strong as a lion, and its prey is sometimes even bigger, like an elk or a moose, and it has to hunt in a pack with its fellow wolves. So it has not only to anticipate where the prey is running to, but during the hunt, it has to communicate with its fellow wolves. So the wolf still has to be more intelligent than the lion. So there seems to be a selective pressure to increase brain capacity, and with it to improve the integration of high-resolution sensory information and coordinate fine-tuned motor activity in a subset of more complex animals. Of course, given all the species on our planet, there are not many, but there are several examples. And if you compare an octopus and a dolphin and a human, we are very different and developed very differently. An octopus, there were already octopuses out there like 350 million years ago. So clearly also a many-pass event. Now we come to the major transition, technological intelligence. So, and this is kind of a intriguing one, because we are, of course, the only species that we say is technologically intelligent. There's some other animals that tools, but we are the only one able to modify our environments to our needs, colonize nearly any habitable stretch of land on our planet. We have pets dominate our fellow animals and rose to a population of many billion individuals, and even do space exploration now. So, so what is so special about this? Well, we are social animals, of course, have a high dexterity in our hands, and invented fire, language, and the heat engine. That's all very important. But since the transition only occurred in one species, we cannot really say whether it's a many-pass or a critical path process, or even a random walk event. So it seems to be right at the beginning and right at the end. We are not sure whether this works, but everything in between seems to be a many-pass event. So if we would conclude from that, then we could say, if the origin of life is really extremely unlikely, then we could live still in a rather empty universe. Of course, we do not think so. We have actually a lot of indications that we are not, our planet is not that special where life originated. So we do not believe that this is the way. But if that is not the case, if the origin of life it can be still a rare event, but if it happens often enough, then we think the evolution goes further and further, that we live in a cosmic zoo. We call it cosmic zoo because we do not know how often you have technologically advanced life. How special we are in that regard. We are special, there's no question about it. It happened only once on our planet, but we don't know how often it will happen on other planets. So if we look for complex life, where else would we look for? Well, to probability that any specific form of life, as we know it or not, will be found in another planetary body will depend mostly on the nature and history of that alien world. So the history is very important. So I'm going now through a couple of possibilities through, and you will see that we have some examples of that even in our own solar system. First, I'll discuss superhabitable planets. So they may be related to super Earth, planets that are more habitable than our own planet. Then we'll look at ice-covered global oceans, planets barren and devoid of surface liquids, frigid worlds with abundant liquid hydrocarbons, rogue planets, and planets with an atmospheric biosphere. So what could make a planet more habitable than Earth? Well, first of all, we have to acknowledge that the habitability of Earth varied a lot in our own history. We kind of can quantify it really with biomass and biodiversity. And there were periods that where this was larger than it is on Earth today. So as superhabitable, we would understand a planetary body that has a larger biomass and more biodiversity than the current Earth. And we have to be careful with the word habitable, because it does not mean necessarily that the planet holds life, because the origin of life could have never occurred, or maybe the life was extinguished by a cataclysmic event in the planet's natural history. So even if we identify a planet to be habitable or superhabitable, it does not mean necessarily that it has life on it. So when we looked into it, and that was with René Heller from the Max Planck Institute and Ed Guinan from Villanova University, we looked for most valuable planets, how we use the planets that might be more habitable than Earth. And we identified some relevant parameters. We identified it as parameters in orbit around a K-dwarf star. That may be a surprise that our star is not the best for that. About 5 to 8 billion years old, 1.4 times more massive, a little bit higher temperature, higher oxygen level, more coastal areas, a large moon, and plate tectonics. And I will go into these things a little bit into detail. So first, I will tell you too why we believe that the K star is very advantageous. You see the 3 star types that we kind of more closely identified: G-type, K-type, and M-type. So all of them are main sequence and dwarfs. And the K stars provide long-lived and stable environments for 15 billion years or more. So this is definitely a great advantage. And so I don't have the intense coronal X-ray and FUV UV emissions as M stars, as G stars, and not the short lifetime that G stars have, like our sun. So our sun, Venus used to be in the habitable zone. Now it's Earth. And it's getting warmer and warmer because the radiation output of the G star, our sun, is increasing. So in 1 billion years, Earth won't be habitable anymore for humans. In 4 billion years, there's probably no life anymore on our planet. So K-type stars are much better in that regard. And also K-type stars have not the intense radiation environment of early M stars. And the other problem with M stars is that planets around it are often tidally locked, although it shows the same face basically to the star, like our moon to our planet. And that way, one area that shows towards the stars is getting extremely hot and the other extremely cold. And this way you cannot develop a global biosphere. Then we think it would be good for a planet to be a little bit older than our age. Earth is 4.6 billion years old. That would give more time to develop a complex and diverse biosphere with lots of biomass. But we have to be careful not to be getting too old, because of course there's a higher risk of a cataclysmic event and also internally generated heat. So the radioactivity can be fastly exhausted, like it is for Mars to a large degree. It would be also good if it's a bit more massive than Earth, because you would have more interior heating and a thicker atmosphere. And flight is, of course, a good way of locomotion. We don't, as humans, can't do it, but most of the species on our planet can do it. But if you're too large, you may evolve into a gas giant, mini Neptune. So then surface temperature, this is something we looked into it actually in recent research, and it's a kind of a mixed bag. It suggests at first that the temperature, if the temperature higher, that's good. But it seems it's only good if also the relative humidity is higher. So we need a moist atmosphere with a high oxygen content. And then you do have better conditions that we see, for example, in the Carboniferous period, where we had large rainforests and swamps, which basically deposited a lot of the oil and gas that we use nowadays. So that was a very productive period of time. What is also good is if you have a lot of scattered land, as you have in the coastal areas, highest biological productivity, lots of biomass and biodiversity. But if you have one giant planet, one giant continent, and otherwise ocean only, there you have a lot of inland deserts. And of course, the inland deserts, there's not much life or much productivity there. That was during the time of Pangaea. Good is also to have a large moon at a moderate distance. We defined at some point a planetary habitability index. But okay, the tidal flexing is a good thing. And Earth moon might have been also critical for the origin of life on our planet if it occurred in a geothermal pool or tidal flat on the planetary surface. Again, origin of life, we don't know. It could be also that it was a hydrothermal vent, in which case probably the moon didn't have that much of an effect. But of course, if the moon is too close, there's a danger of tidal locking, and the planet could be locking too if it's too big. So there's possible problems as well. And then what you also want is a plate tectonics or similar geochemical recycling mechanism and a protective geomagnetic field. So that is critical really for any planet to be habitable, or then also for being super habitable. So René, Ed, and I looked into the data set, whether there are any exoplanets in the current data set that could be super habitable. So we looked at roughly 4,500 extrasolar planets, and you see here the mass of the star, here you see the radius, and this here would be the habitable zone. Again, a lot of the planets is still biased because if they're bigger, we can see them easier. There should be even more and more planets coming over here, and they're basically all the time detected. So there are some in this habitable zone. And if you zoom in and over here, see that then there's actually quite about 24 planets that we can identify. Most of them as this KOI, they still have to be confirmed, that are in the zone. And from this 24 top contenders, I like to highlight two of them, which I think they are the most promising. Here is KOI 5554.01. It's a G star, about like our sun, but it is a bit older. It is about the planet around is about the size of Earth, and the temperature is higher. And then we have here KOI 5715.01. This is a K star. So of course the K star is highlighted. So we have here 3 matches too. Age is older, the radius of the planet we don't know, and the temperature is lower, but you know, the effective temperature may be much higher if there's a greenhouse effect. Earth, of course, has a greenhouse effect too. Actually, the basic greenhouse effect is a good thing, otherwise it would be way too cold on Earth. Of course, the human-induced greenhouse just puts more stress on species. But we have to be careful with those, you know, because KOI 5715 was discovered by the Kepler telescope in a star field within the constellation of Cygnus, nearly 3,000 years away, 3,000 light years away. So we're not getting any information anytime soon. And all of those planets, the KOIs must be confirmed more than 100 light years away. But the point of the exercise is more that there could be planets outside that are more habitable than our planet. And the solar parameters that we use to assess this are really objective, because as we see, we've come up that actual K stars are better than G stars, and our sun is a G star. While the planetary parameters are biased on Earth, the one type of life we know, okay, but we can't do anything. We have to obviously go start somewhere. So if we find a planet or at some point a moon, because we're now detecting also exomoons that fits the search criteria in most or all categories, well, we think we should receive a higher priority than Earth-like planets. If you like to know more about it, we published that paper in 2020 in the journal Astrobiology. But let's go a little bit on the wild side, so to speak, and look at other potential habitable planets that are not Earth-like. And the first thing I like to start is an ice-covered global ocean. And that has been already a while ago when Lewis Irvin and I suggested, you know, if you have an ice-covered ocean, you know, the best example is probably Europa there, you could have an organism that use osmotrophism to obtain energy. You know, you have here your layered ocean layer, you have here your high salinity environment. If you push your water molecules out, you gain energy. And if this organism can then move up into the low salinity environment, it can take up water and again gain energy. And you see here how the basically can build then possibly ATP. If you calculate that through, if the organism floats between the hypertonic ocean floor and the hypotonic water, some distance above the ocean floor, and we assume 0.7 osmoles as a gradient between the intracellular fluids and surrounding environment, teleosts are sharks, so that is like in sharks. Then the potential energy yield would be about 0.006 electron volt per water molecule. We know bacteria that are about 5 times the gradient can take, so that could be 5 times the number easily. But even if we assume that like in a shark, then with 50 more water molecules going through, you can build 1 ATP molecule. So in principle, that can work. If we move on and look for barren planets devoid of surface liquids, now what comes to mind is, of course, Mars. And our field work is in the Atacama Desert, in the hyper-arid area. Here you see some salt crystals, and here is cytonomine, that's a pigment inside. So there's life inside. Here you even see a cyanobacteria inside the salt crystals. And so there are the organisms like to live in the salt crystals. Why is this? Because with the salt crystals, salt is hygroscopic. For example, sodium chloride. And with that, you can attract water directly from the atmosphere. you can actually go one more step further, and with the process is called the liquescence, because this hygroscopicity can be so strong that you draw so much water from the atmosphere that you get a solution. And of course, that water, the microbes or other animals, like here's a thorny devil lizard, can use for metabolic water to use to make a living. And my graduate student Debbie Maus and several other co-authors and I published a paper and show that certain archaea can metabolize when supplied by water from the liquescence only. So if you live in a very arid environment, like for example in Mars, then you could take the water directly up from the atmosphere. So it does not need to have to rain. And in the Atacama Desert where we live, it on average rains once every decade or so. And the organisms can take up the water from the atmosphere. If you look now in a completely different world, frigid worlds with abundant hydrocarbons, well, what comes to mind is Titan, right? And if you're in such an environment, you have to think about too, how do you make a living? One is, for example, for Titan works acetylene plus hydrogen and to combine it to methane. That gives you nicely a lot of energy. And there's actually acetylene is produced in Titan's atmosphere, falls to the ground or into the lakes. We know that there's hydrogen there. And actually there's about 5% methane inside. And the methane is actually destroyed in the atmosphere, should be destroyed within 10 million years. There's 5%, there's a lot of it. So there's a question too, maybe it's all the time reproduced. The question is by what? Maybe even by a metabolic pathway. So this is a way. And of course, we have difficulties to do that, reproduce this in our labs, because acetylene is very explosive. It has so much energy. But the thing is that Titan is very, very cold. So if you want to make a living there, you have to have a lot of energy. And the same thing goes if we have metabolic pathways involving radicals. All those radicals have been actually detected on Titan. And so you could, with those ones, have radical reactions producing cyanamide on Earth. In life, it's used to glue amino acids to proteins together. Or HCN, which is a valuable compound too, imposed several times involved in the origin of life. So it's the same thing as with radicals. Our metabolism doesn't use radicals, or very rarely. And if it uses, it must have to repair it right away because they're so rich in energy. But if you're in an environment that is extremely cold, like Titan, then you need something with this punch on it to do that. So, and we see here from that image over here that there's, ethane, methane lakes on the surface of Titan. Here could be the acetylene falling and accumulating, and you probably have overheated volatile compounds over here. You have water, you have ammonia. You really have everything what you would need, what we think what you need for life. And of course, if you would have life in a hydrocarbon reservoir, then you have to think about that the membranes may have to be different, right? Because if you have a water as a solvent, you have to have the polar lengths out to interact with the water. But if you have ethane or methane, which is a non-polar compound, then you have to also have some non-polar endings out from a membrane. So if life exists there, it would be most likely be different. One more way out idea is that there may be a lot of rock planets, and it's actually more accepted right now that maybe for every terrestrial planet that we have in the solar system, or in any solar system, there's a rogue planet out. So a planet that basically just wanders through the universe and is not bound to a star. So how could their life exist on a rogue planet? Well, there's ideas about it too, because there could be life forms that use thermal gradients. And there's basically, if you do not have a sun, you would have an ice layer over it, or thick hydrogen and helium atmosphere. But below you could have liquid water, and you have a gradient. Maybe you have these black smokers or hydrothermal mounts there also. And there's different ways how you could extract the heat energy. And Anthony Muller and I published one paper in Thermal Energy and the Origin of Life, and we proposed too that thermosynthesis may be a precursor of photosynthesis, actually. And there's different ways how to do it. You have, for example, here a cell that attaches it. There's a vacuole that heats up, and then it can be utilized when the organism or the cell detaches again. Or do you have some kind of circulating system? You have some kind of a more kinetic system. So there's different ways how to do that. And maybe to totally go into the speculative, maybe could it be that there could be life around a neutron star? And this is not any of my ideas, but it's from Feinberg and Shapiro. And Shapiro, I still work together. Unfortunately, he's not alive anymore, but their ideas I thought was fascinating because I think we are much more always to link, okay, we think DNA and RNA, it is so superior, and maybe there's some kind of other chemical code, but that devised a way where a magnetic code could work. You have here, for example, a randomly aligned magnet, and then you have a new magnet coming there. And the magnet doesn't care what size it is, it just goes, aligns to the chain. And so then you could have actually a duplication of the chain. And with that, you could, in principle, also say information from one generation to the other. Of course, that doesn't have to be around a neutron star. That could be some kind of other a planet that has a huge magnetic field. But even on Earth, there's a lot of animals that are sensitive to magnetic field lines, and so like pigeons or something like that. They find their way oriented to the magnetic North Pole. But to have that, of course, you would think of a much larger magnetic field, and of course, neutron stars are the stars that have the biggest magnetic field. Okay, finally, let's come still to another possibility: a planet with an atmospheric biosphere. Of course, as an example, we could take here Venus. We do not know whether that one exists, but it has been suggested, and several courses and we suggested that too. We came even up with chemotrophic metabolic pathway and photosystem 1 pathway. Again, these compounds have been detected, and especially photosystem 1 would work greatly there. And we could have also a great adaptation to UV radiation at Venus, and which would be cyclooctave sulfur that could be on the cell, and we know it exists. The mass density is highest here in the lower cloud layer in the atmosphere, where there's the highest amount of water vapor. There's 1 bar pressure, temperature between 30 and 80 degrees C. And the compound actually absorbs strongly in the UV wavelengths and re-emits in the visible wavelengths. So if you're a microbe and have that a coating around your cell, you could do nicely photosynthesis and would be also protected from UV radiation. And there's actually some precedents that in the Yellowstone, in the hot springs, there are some microbes, some sulfur microbes that use a similar system. As you know, there was a paper with a phosphine detected that is controversial, of course, and I was drafted to write a summary on that of what is the case really for life in Venusian cloud or not the case. And you know, there's different kind of arguments that stand in favor. We have habitable temperature and pressure in continuous stable cloud environment, positive. Super rotation of the atmosphere and sufficient available energy, especially suitable for photosynthesis. If present, life in the clouds likely evolved from past life on the Venusian surface. So, not to say that there's life in the atmosphere is always kind of difficult. But if there was life, you know, Venus was in the habitable zone and Venus had early oceans and at some point had life on its surface, of course, a step then is not as far anymore. And there's availability of critical nutrients like carbon, nitrogen, sulfur, and phosphorus. So the arguments against us, the strongest argument is low overall water activity, which is extremely low. So we know of some places, you know, where the very local on the microbial scale, if we think about maybe much higher than on the regional scale. So that would be maybe a way to get around it. But it most likely would require some biochemical pathways that we are not familiar with. Could be possible, of course. It doesn't mean that Earth life is always the best. Then the sulfuric acid concentration are so high that's in a range that Earth life could not cope with it. However, Earth life has also some way to cope with really high acidic concentration, that is with ammonia. So, and ammonia was detected in the Venusian atmosphere, so it could put the pH up to about 1, which would be manageable. You also have a likely lack of trace metals and hydrogen. Of course, then you have the airborne lifestyle. This is all difficult too, so it would have to be a really multi-extremophile living there. I think it is good that there will be 2 NASA missions and 1 ESA mission going to Venus end 2020s, early 2030. And there's also a private mission that will look a bit of whether there's life. So if we summarize, most of the potential planets harboring life might only be suitable to hold microbial life. So there we actually agree with Wharton Brownlee with a rare earth concept, and most, you know, to have a planet that holds complex life, it has to have better habitability parameters. There may be also that some of them may be more habitable than Earth, maybe harbor even intelligent life, but we haven't found anything. So the question is, why not? So if you look at the Fermi paradox, you know, or the Drake equation, the Fermi paradox, of course, by Enrique Fermi brought up. That's why it's named after him, maybe better named Great Silence. That, you know, there is no obvious way to say, okay, there's technologically advanced life, but I mean, all the numbers, if you look at the Drake equation, there should be quite a bit around if we understand our universe and our living space around us somewhere in the right way. And of course, it depends. It's a product, of course. It depends what kind of numbers you plug in here. Since it's a product, if one of them is very, very low, then the number of communicative civilization, Drake said, okay, a technologically advanced civilization is one that can communicate, has radio telescopes, you know, defined intelligent life like that. But if, for example, the origin of life is very, very difficult, then it still could be, you know, even eventually close to 0. But if we use normal values that people do usually put in, then we'll say, okay, I mean, with so many stars and so many planets and the giant galaxies and billions of galaxies, there should be so many civilizations out there. And if we assume a von Neumann probe, and so that's a kind of self-replicating probe that basically goes 1/10 of light velocity and lands on a planet, then colonizes, multiplies, and then goes on. Even if it's only 1/40 of the light velocity, it would take only 4 million years to have explored the whole galaxy. Of course, we haven't seen any of those, and we are not in contact. So the question is, why not? One of the favorite ones is that we are a human zoo, or designated nature preserve, if you want so. Or if you're a Star Trek fan, in German Raumschiff Enterprise, a Trekkie fan, then it's the prime directive, because the aliens don't want to intervene in in the growth of a new civilization, or one that becomes technologically more and more advanced. And so the Star Trek has the prime directive, and so that could be one possibility, of course. I like all from also from Star Trek, Ship in the Bottle, Professor Moriarty. Are we in our universe around us only part of an elaborated computer-generated hologram? That is kind of in a funny kind of a way that, then you can have everything. You can have a lot of life, you can have no life whatsoever except us, because, if it's computer generated. And there's actually some arguments which maybe go into the direction of that observer facts, we have the observer facts in quantum mechanics, which are kind of, odd, that information is actually seem to be trumping physics. And, that's anthropogenic principles, that the natural constants of the universe are also that we can exist. Of course, if there would not be like this, we wouldn't have this talk and this discussion. One explanation what I also like is maybe we are simply not interesting enough or not far enough evolved to have been contacted yet. I mean, let's face it, if we explore the Amazon, we are not trying to communicate with every new worm species that we find, I guess that puts us more into a humble place. Or perhaps advanced civilizations self-destruct at critical junctions in the development. We thought already a long time that the danger of nuclear holocaust is over this, but with this war in Europe, that doesn't seem to be really the case. Of course, I could go black hole particle experiment that goes completely wrong. There could be a lot of things, but that is not really satisfying in my view, because I would think that some civilizations overcame those problems. Maybe we should look from a different angle. How would we detect intelligent life? I mean, usually most of it we use radio waves, and if we see something that's neither highly regular nor highly random, then we take a closer look. The traditional SETI initiatives are with radio frequencies. More expanded SETI efforts are optical. But so far we haven't found anything. So, of course, there's other ways too. If we find somewhere structural complexity, just a road or canal or something like this, is highway here, then we know someone built it, or or more. We leave our junk quite a bit on other planets right now, in our solar system, of course, only so far. And if you find something like this, a rover on another planet, if we explore that and find that, then we know there must have been technologically advanced life, because the rover would never self-assemble. So that could too, but then we have to first go to other planets. So nothing so far. So what could be wrong? Well, like I said, I promised, we'll come back to the origin of life. Problem is maybe it's hard. it happened. Maybe it happened so rarely that we only a few other places where it really happened in the universe. It's definitely not as easy as we imagined before. You know that okay, the Miller-Urey experiment, where we have our primordial soup, we put some lightnings inside, some organic compounds, and voila, the amoeba grows out. Doesn't seem so easy. Well, it makes you a little bit humble as astrobiologist, because you know some physicists know what happens in the first fractions of a second of the start of the universe. We still don't have a good idea how life originated on Earth and under what conditions it can exist or originate elsewhere. But we do know that life occurred as early as possibly it could on Earth, as soon as it really cooled down and there were liquid water there and conditions were right. So it doesn't seem to be something so exceptional. And then there's still the idea of the great filter. You know that at some point, maybe for most life or technological civilization, it doesn't go further. And that's where it stops. And that's why we are not in contact. It may be at the origin of life, of course, then we will be all alone in the universe. And maybe on the step toward technological intelligence, like in the cosmic zoo hypothesis, we have only one example. And it's kind of still puzzling why we humans evolved that far and not any of the other species that were around. And there were so many around, and a lot of them were intelligent too, or are intelligent, but that didn't take the next step. Of course, if the great filter is right in front of us, that would be most scary. Given that the universe is so well suited for life, shouldn't be that much more evidence of life around us? So I think that the Fermi paradox tells us something important about life and the universe. The question is only what, and I don't know that either. So if we want to put our conclusions together, what I like to take with from this talk is that biology can certainly be more diverse than we observe on Earth. And there's already a lot of diversity on Earth. And biology may be more complex than we anticipated on many different places. Like here, we have a liquid asphalt lake in Trinidad that I work there too. There is life inside. Life and environment are intrinsically intertwined. One doesn't go without the other. So I cannot understand life without understanding the environment in which it lives, and vice versa. And maybe at what we can say too, when we're searching for life, we have to think out of the box. And the universe might be stranger than we think. And at the end, I still want to make a kind of a cartoon, kind of funny if you want. So this is the cutest alien that I could find on the internet. And it comes with a spaceship. And it flies by Earth and wants to know whether there's life on Earth. So what does the alien see first? There's lots of water. There's large areas with cloud cover. Our alien is smart. He knows that UV radiation is not good for life. You know, it gives you skin cancer and kills things. You know, it makes things sterile actually. So there's enhanced UV radiation on our planet. So our alien knows that's not good. There's also the presence of an aggressive oxidizer in the atmosphere, oxygen. And because of that, there's only trace amounts of organic compounds in the atmosphere. So our alien is smart, right? He knows there's no life without organics. You know, that's I said with the Viking life detection experiment. No body is no life. You need the organics, otherwise there can't be any life. If there's only trace amount of organics in the atmosphere, how can there be life on this planet? And then our alien looks a little bit closer and sees there's an atmosphere with 21% oxygen that is near combustion level, self-combustion level. Our aliens get now really scared, and looks around, Earth turns around here and sees in California already the regional size fires, and in Greece it's burning too, and so our alien gets really scared. And then the aliens thinks about it too and sees also water, and sees that most of the surface is covered by all the solvent, water. How could their life possibly exist submerged in this kind of solvent? So our alien gets frustrated, just flies on and says, okay, there can't be any life on Earth. Now, of course, there's all different kinds of signs of life on Earth. So I don't want that you take this with us. Actually, the point is more, it depends from your viewpoint. You can imagine a viewpoint that is very, very different. And if the alien has a very, very different biochemistry, then it actually comes to conclude that, life, Earth is not such a great place for life. So, and if you would like to know more, I have, as Sabine pointed out, several books. The last one is A Cosmic Soup, Complex Life on Many Worlds. That's where the talk was mostly based on. The most academic book is Life in the Universe, Expectation of Constraints. That's in the 3rd edition. And there was some other books that were a lot of fun, like Mega Catastrophes, Ways the World Could End. Actually, put the viruses inside too. And Alien Encounter, that was a science fiction novel. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. And if you want to know more, I have a website with blogs and all that stuff on it, searchforlifeintheuniverse.com. Thank you very much. So I go then, I stopped in the share.
Thank you, Dirk. This was really a very profound lecture. Thank you so much. Sometimes I had difficulties to follow when it was very scientific, but it was really, really interesting. The last remarks you made reminds me at Stanislav Lem when he in Solaris, when he wrote about this Goddard-like ocean, and it's a completely other life form, intelligent life form, in a way we don't imagine. So I agree with you that we should change our point of view and think in another way or outside the box, like to say always. Life form could be really different. And I would like to take the questions from the chat. We have people watching from Norway, from Brazil. Some didn't wrote from where they are watching, but there was a great discussion here. Ena Larsen schreibt, we cannot ignore the fact that life on our planet may have been planted by aliens. It may also happen that most planets with life have had their life planted or processed by aliens. And he says also another thing is that human behavior differs significantly from animals. We are the only ones who do not live up to our potential. Animals never ignore vital solutions, while humans often do. And could it be that we have a completely wrong definition of what life really is? It's what you are saying. We know botanical and biological life. Perhaps there are more forms, but that we are not looking advanced enough. And as it seems that both Mars and Venus have had more life-friendly conditions in the past, so perhaps we are immigrants here after the environment that collapsed. I doubt this a little bit. And
I mean, to the panspermia, two of those relate to panspermia, right? So I think that panspermia between the terrestrial planets is definitely something what can happen and probably has happened. So between Mars, Earth, and Venus. And yeah, there is an idea that it could be that Earth's life could be from Mars, because Mars was earlier habitable, and then by asteroid impacts basically came then on Earth to Earth, because Earth had still with the moon this huge impact, and then took longer to cool down. I mean, that is of course, that is always a possibility. That is a possibility, but then you still have to figure out how life originated on Mars. So this is something that could happen. Otherwise, I think it's just statistically too unlikely from one solar system to the other to have that. You can, of course, there was a famous paper in Icarus by Crick and Orgel, and that was directed panspermia, that some kind of species could have implanted life on our planet. I mean, it's a kind of a fascinating idea, and I spoke at some point with Leslie Orgel about it, and he didn't like that discussion at all. But the problem is, again, then it would have to originate it on the other planet somewhere. In principle, we cannot exclude that, of course. But it looks like that, our life, that it's even the interior of cells fits very much the early oceans. So it looks to me more from the chemistry, and also that it's really evolved on our planet. We have to keep in mind, though, if we would want to make such an experiment, let's say in a few years we can identify an exoplanet, say 20 light years away, and that has an ocean on it, and we don't care about planetary protection, for example, and say, okay, let's shoot some of Earth's bacteria to that planet. And we could put them in a dormant way, and then, it could take 500,000 or even 1 million years. Bacteria can be dormant that long. There would be enough that would survive, and put a parachute on it and land them into that ocean. So in principle, we might be very close if you really wanted to do something like that. So I think this is still always possibilities. We cannot right out of the bat dismiss. But I think from that, what we know so far, of course, it is a stretch. It's highly speculative. So we look in the sciences or in the astrobiology mostly first, okay, what would be the straightforward explanation?
But I think even if you do that, that you put some microbes or on another planet, it doesn't mean that we will have the same life like in Earth, or the same life will develop, because we know that when for example, the dinosaurs were extinguished, then this has not survived the biggest or the smallest living beings, if not in between. My English is too small.
Yeah, I mean, you could do it only, with bacteria, anything bigger really. And of course, the bacteria would then interact with the alien environment and possibly evolve very differently from what you see on our planet. And a lot of things or innovation, evolution are kind of happened, by chance. So I think you would be getting very different kind of organism that from the anatomy may look very different. Just think about, okay, that planet now has is 1.5 times more mass. Then yeah, I mean, you need to migrate, for example.
Atomwaffe writes, we definitely have a wrong definition of what intelligent life is, if you count yourself. Also.
I don't know. I think our definition of intelligent, I mean, of course, there's a lot of different definitions what intelligent is, and a lot of what life is. I think the problem is more, you know, you can compare it with water, you know. Before we didn't know what water was on a molecular basis, H2O or H9O4 or so better, you know. We would say, okay, water is translucent, it has this and this property, and that's what we do the same thing with life. So we are at the stage with life at, you know, before we had the molecular theory of water. And then with life, of course, we have, I mean, we have a very diverse planet. We have very, very different life forms on our planet, but we have only one type of, you know, one example of life, one planet where there's life on. So of course, we are very limited. With intelligence, of course, there's different ways, you know, how intelligence can manifest itself as well. But, you know, I think some of them are common things, you know, that you can extrapolate in the future. You can anticipate what happens, you know, in the future, and that you can react to it. So there are some common things, I think, that is clear that what are intelligent behaviors is, or that belong to intelligent behavior. But there may be some that we are not aware of.
Mm-hmm. I have also a question. It's regarding what Ina said. I showed you this picture about the tardigrades. Also in 2019, the space propeller crashed on the surface of the moon with thousands of tardigrades on board. And as they belong to extremophiles, and you showed it in your lecture that they can survive in extremely harsh environments. So could it be possible that they still have survived? And also I think it could be because...
No, they eventually will all die there. I mean, they have no food over there, you know, they live in moss usually, you know, the tardigrades. Eat algae also. There's no algae. I mean, it could be, you probably, if you collect some of them and bring them back to Earth, they may come back to life because they were dormant at that time, you know, and in their dormant state survived there for a couple of years on the moon. But on the moon itself, they eventually will all die.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Sorry.
Adriano has a question.
Adriano?
No, it's such a fascinating and wide field of speculation and imagining. And of course, until when we will stay only here on Earth, we can only try to speculate and imagine what it could be. So I think this is one of the reasons that moves us to go outside and to see what really exists on other celestial bodies and other environments and so on. Yes, I was starting to think during your excellent presentation that here on Earth we have a particular condition that is a magnetic field that protects our life from the cosmic radiation, from the sun radiation, and so on. And I started to ask to myself if a magnetic field is really necessary for life, let me say a needed condition to but then I try to reply to myself, and because the magnetic field is only one of the conditions of this particular world that is our planet. We have a range of temperature. We have light, determined graduation of light from the sun. We have an oxygen atmosphere. We have a gravity, 1g, that for us is 1g because we measure gravity on the basis of the Earth standard. So I started to think that these particular environmental conditions shaped the life on Earth. and that it would be maybe only that the possibility that one only condition changes a little bit, and the Earth and the life would be shaped in quite another way. So it is also possible that in your presentation you also examined these possibilities, that there are life systems that are not based on oxygen, that are not based on a metabolic cycle as we know it, that who knows, there could be a life system based on silicium. And yeah, it came to my mind a beautiful novel written by Theodor Sturgeon that was the dreaming crystals. It was a life form based on crystals, that they were not moving, not doing anything, but only thinking and dreaming, and their dreams in some way was modifying the reality. So there could be so many different things in the universe that probably the first time we will meet a new form of life, it will be completely different from whatever hypothesis we may have. Being able to think about. And so, okay, I don't know if I am driving a real question from this thing that these thoughts that I was saying, but for sure, yeah, I think the logical thought is that the particular conditions, environmental condition of this planet shaped the life on this planet, and even Earth-like planets, I think, could not be exactly the same of conditions that we have on Earth. Some way there will be different, so they will generate different kind of life, different forms, different shapes, different behaviors. Who knows? I don't know.
What do you think about this, Dirk?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, that that was one of my main points, really, that you cannot understand life without the environment and vice versa. I mean, if you take it to the extreme, if you, for example, if we in the future have a colony on Mars and there are humans living on Mars through several generations, for example, that will physiologically and anatomically change too. Because since it's only 40% of the gravity what is on Earth, they will need that muscle mass, We as any kind of organisms is always optimized, We do not, our bodies, as organisms, be very energy efficient. So, if we do not need the muscle mass, because it's only 40% of the gravity, you will lose it there, like people already in the International Space Station lose muscle mass and bone mass, because they do not feel the gravity of Earth. And so if humans would live there for several generations, they would be at some point actually looking different than from the humans from Earth. So life will always adapt to it. To your first question was magnetic field. I think the magnetic field was extremely important for the evolution of life on our planet, but mostly for the evolution of land life, not for ocean life. Because if you live in an ocean, you don't need the magnetic field as much, because the water actually is a good shield of cosmic radiation. Of course, in the upper surface where the most light is, you still get the most radiation. But I still can imagine that the life can still hang on in the ocean. But to go on the land, you're really exposed, and to have land colonization going on, that the first plants and animals move on land, and if they would be constantly hit by cosmic radiation, I think they would have a very difficult time to repair themselves all the time and survive there. But absolutely right. Wherever the life is, if just the environment of the planet is just a little bit different, it's the G, or it's the pressure or the gases that are on the planet, then the life will be different, will be adapted, optimally adapted to it.
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay. This going into what will be our changes during our expansion in the solar system, it opens quite another discussion, of course. And what you said about Mars gravity makes me think, it always made me think that maybe the O'Neill model is better, thinking about habitats. We can make O'Neill rotating big cities around Earth and around Mars and around other planets using asteroid resources to build them. And having rotation, we can have 1G. So at least one of the conditions we have on Earth can be preserved living outside Earth. And of course, we will have the problem to protect ourselves from the radiation, but this problem we will have it also on Mars, because there's no magnetic field over there and a very thin atmosphere, so we will be very less protected. But my first question was, if maybe, considering that coming out from the ocean, the first organism that came out from the ocean and start to live on the Earth's surface, already were exposed to more radiations with respect to the amount they were exposed when they were inside the ocean. So I am thinking that maybe if a life form can have birth on a planet without a magnetic field, life can grow up adapted to that condition and to be resistant to cosmic.
I wanted to say too.
This could be another, but it would be different. For sure, it would be different from ourselves.
I mean, it would depend a lot what exact the radiation levels are, because it would be very difficult. It would energetically not work because you constantly have to repair yourself, and it wouldn't be able to survive. It would have to have also very efficient repair mechanisms. But there are some Deinococcus radiodurans, some bacteria that are very good in it. So they could imagine that at some point they're evolving some kind of multicellular organisms that are very good in repairing themselves too. So that would be the totally intriguing, fascinating thing going on another planet, and which has life, and exploring that, because that would be mind-boggling, this is what we want to do.
That would be the real adventure and really interesting thing to do. Not only to send the robots, because robots cannot feel really.
Yeah, but I think we have to send the robots first, because we will not survive this long trip.
We send a robot, but we also have to go.
Okay, I would like to close this. I only wanted to give you the comments here. Thomas writes, I love it. Ina Larsen wrote, thanks for a fantastic event. So people enjoyed it, and we enjoyed it too. Thank you, Dirk, for being here with us for this really profound lecture. It was really amazing to listen to you. And Adriano, thank you for your help, and to the audience, thank you for being with us. Our next webinar will be in 2 weeks, and our guest will be, I have to open here.
I think Alberto Cavallo.
Yeah, Alberto Cavallo. He will talk about astropolitics, also an interesting topic, and 17th of October. And the exception is that we also will have a webinar at the 24th of October with Stephen Wolf. He will talk about creating a global policy framework that will enable the creation of communities beyond Earth. So, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And I wish you a nice evening. And yeah, until the next time. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Ad Astra.
Ad Astra, yeah.